welcome. Good evening, everyone. We'll just wait a few minutes as everyone's joining onto the webinar. We had a full house booked, so we need to give everyone time to come on and join us. Still people ticking in, which is lovely. It's a nice sunny evening where I am. I hope you've all got the nice weather too. Right. Well, we may have a few late joiners, but I think that we will get started just now. So first of all, good evening. My name is Jenny Hermley and I'm the Communications Officer for the project Unlocking the Severn. And thank you all for attending our talk this evening. So this event is brought to you by our project Unlocking the Severn, and we're a conservation and river engagement project, and we're trying to unlock the river for people and wildlife. So our project is providing fish passage at 4 barriers on the River Severn and 2 on the River Tean, and this means that we can restore 158 miles of river habitat to benefit a host of important fish species. We do also have lots of activities for people of all ages and interests and backgrounds. So if you haven't done already, do make sure you have a look at our website and get involved. The project is being delivered by partners, a group of partners. So Canal River Trust, Severn Rivers Trust, the Environment Agency and Natural England. And it's all made possible from funding through the National Lottery Heritage Fund and the EU Life programme. So this evening, I'm talking slowly for that bit to allow the signing. We're joined by Laura, and she's a British Sign Language interpreter, and she's going to be present throughout. So please also be mindful that this is a live recording, with live interpretation. It's not a translation. So this talk this evening will be a follow-on to our talk about the Beverley Fish Pass. It'll be really interesting to hear which of you this evening attended that previous talk about the Beverley Fish Pass. So maybe drop us a note in the chat if you were at that one, we'd love to know. And we're going to talk about what a fish pass is. So that we'll cover again for those who are new this evening and didn't see the previous talk. And then we're going to go on and talk in detail about our Diglis Fish Pass. So it's a different kind of fish pass than the one at Beverley, which is a bypass channel. And Richard is going to explain all about the design and construction of our deep vertical slot fish passes, of which Diglis is the biggest, but there are also 2 others on the Severn as well with a similar design. So a little bit of housekeeping and then I won't hold you up any longer. Please be aware this webinar is being recorded, and afterwards we're going to load it up to our Unlocking the Severn YouTube channel, and the webinar should last about an hour. You have got the opportunity to submit any questions. So to do that, you just type your question into the chat box. Or the Q&A box is even better, actually. Yes, the Q&A box. Please use the Q&A box for questions and the chat for chat. And we will endeavour to answer as many questions as we can, but we are time limited. The last Fish Pass talk we did, we got so many questions, we couldn't answer them all in the evening, so we might have to do a bit of following up afterwards. During the screen sharing, you should be able to see the presentation on one side and the speakers on the right-hand side. So if that isn't the case for you now, and you would like to make sure you can see the British Sign Language interpretation, then just follow the instructions I'm going to talk you through. You need to click on the View Options button in the top centre of your screen. You need to click on the Side-by-Side mode option in the drop-down menu, and you will see a tick once it's selected. So if you have any problems with that, again, just drop us a note in the chat and we can put the guidance back in there as well. So now back to our talk this evening. We're very lucky we have Richard Leigh with us again to give us his expert insights Richard is a chartered civil engineer with over 25 years experience working on construction projects. He's spent the majority of his career working for the Canal River Trust in engineering works, specialising in building and repairing assets such as canals, locks and bridges that are next to rivers and waterways. Richard actually left Canal River Trust in 2017 and joined Kia, and that's been our main delivery partner for this project. So in summer 2018, he was asked to join the Unlocking the Severn project delivery team as a project engineer. And I'm sure he's going to explain you lots more about his role. So I am going to hand over to Richard and he will tell you all the interesting stuff about this fish pass. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jenny. I've been asked to speak to you today and deliver a whistle-stop tour of why and how we're building the River Severn fish passes. And sharing examples of the challenges we've had to face whilst building Diglis Fish Pass. More than happy to answer any questions you may have, and as Jenny said, you can send them through to the Q&A facility and we'll come back to those at the end. But firstly, I thought I should explain who I am, my background, and how I've been lucky enough to find myself working on this project. So this is me. As Jenny mentioned in her introduction, I've worked as an engineer for over 20 years, with the majority of this time spent working for the Canal River Trust. I started working for Kia in 2017 because I miss being directly involved in fixing problems and delivering construction projects. I joined the Unlocking the Severn delivery team in 2018, and I'm effectively seconded into CRT as their engineer on the project. I undertake a variety of roles, but my primary task has been to take the outline proposals for the fish passes, manage the detailed design process and ensure we have a buildable design, help resolve any issues found during construction, and perhaps most importantly, ensure that what we build meets the requirements to allow fish to use these structures. One important thing to note is that I'm not a fish pass designer. I work very closely with a team of experts who provide the information and guidance needed to ensure the structures work from a fisheries perspective. So to start with, why do you need fish passes on the River Severn? During the Industrial Revolution, the River Severn became very important for carrying goods and materials. In 1824, it was noted that the river is navigable the whole way, but navigation is very much impeded by the lowness of the water in summer and by the floods in winter. In the 1840s, navigation on the River Severn was improved by the construction of a series of weirs and locks. This photo shows a typical weir on the River Severn. These are large structures designed to increase the depth of water upstream. The cross-section shows that they were constructed from large rocks encased in an early form of concrete. The water level upstream is roughly 2 meters higher than the water level below. Almost immediately after the construction of the weirs, the impact on migratory fish was noted, as you can see from this quote from a fisheries report in 1862. The finest river in England is nearly ruined by building walls across it, sufficient to stop everything except a large and powerful animal. Works were undertaken to improve fish passage relatively soon after construction of the weirs by the provision of notches in the weir crest to give a flow of water for the fish to swim up, which is what you can see in this photo here. This is Diglis before we've done our works, and this was the original fish pass. This worked for more powerful fish, such as salmon, but didn't help weaker species, such as the twait shad. So where are the weirs? Weirs and locks were constructed along the river in 6 locations: at Gloucester, Upper Lode, Diglis, Beverley, Holt and Lincoln. The bottom 2 weirs are tidal, so the fish can simply swim over them at high tides. Our project has therefore focused on fish pass provision at the weirs around Worcester. If you've attended other Unlocking the Severn talks or events, you'll know that our target fish is called the twait shad. The populations of this fish were devastated by the construction of the weirs as they were not particularly strong swimmers and were unable to make it over the weir at Diglis. From a design perspective, by targeting the weakest swimming fish on the River Severn, it should mean that all other fish will be able to use the new fish passes. So how do you overcome the weir problem? The simplest method to enable fish passage is the removal of the obstruction. This approach has been taken at Powick Weir on the River Team. Here, the existing weir has been partially removed and the riverbed regraded so that it is a much shallower gradient that allows fish to swim up. Unfortunately, it isn't possible to remove the River Severn weirs without impacting on the navigation. Therefore, it is necessary to design a new structure adjacent to the existing weirs that allows fish to pass. So what is a fish pass? It is defined by the Environment Agency as any form or conduit, channel, lift, other device or structure which facilitates the free passage of migrating fish over, through or around any dam or other obstruction, whether natural or man-made, in either an upstream or downstream direction. So how do you design a fish pass? The Environment Agency has produced guidance notes called the EA Fish Pass Manual. This provides detailed information on the legislation, selection and approval of fish passes in England and Wales. This document is free and available online if anyone is interested. We worked with a specialist consultant called FishTech, who have extensive knowledge and experience of following the Fish Pass Manual to successfully design and gain approval for fish passes across the country. As mentioned earlier, one of the key things you need to know is your target fish species. The burst speed and length of time this can be sustained by the fish gives the parameters for the design of how water flows through the structure. For our target species, the Thwaite shad, the fish passes have been designed so that the maximum water speed is 2.5 meters per second or 5.5 miles per hour over a length of around 1 meter. There are many different types of fish pass that could be used. A good example of a more simple structure is here at Knightsford Bridge Measuring Weir, again on the River Team. In this case, it wasn't possible to remove the weir, so instead the weir length was increased by placing rocks on top of the existing weir. This reduced the slope gradient of the weir, which in turn reduces the speed of water as it flows over it to the speed at which our target fish can swim up it. Where there are natural constraints and space is limited, more sophisticated fish pass structures are needed. For the weirs on the River Severn, 2 different types of fish pass were chosen. Deep vertical slots at Diglis, Holt and Lincoln, and a naturalised bypass channel at Beverley. The deep vertical slot fish passes have been used at the sites where less space was available. Both types of fish pass have a series of small steps designed so the fish can use their burst speed to get up to the next level, catch their breath before going again. How the structures achieve this is very different, and I'll explain this in more detail. This talk is going to primarily focus on Diglis Fish Pass, which is the first weir requiring improved fish passage on the River Severn, and I'm able to explain the key design features along with the specific challenges of building them on the following slides. The key features of the deep vertical slot design used at Diglis are the gradient is greater by approximately 50% than a naturalised bypass channel, as less space was available. The overall fish pass length is approximately 80 metres compared to 120 metres for the naturalised bypass channel at Beverley. Very long and heavy piles form both the temporary restraint and permanent outer walls of the structure. This is why they're called deep vertical slots, as the bottom is up to 7.5 metres below the adjacent riverside path, which is roughly the same as a 3-storey house. The ground inside the piles, after they were installed, is removed. The photo on the left shows us undertaking this. This was a massive undertaking with over 4,000 metres cubed of material excavated. This is roughly the same as 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools. The fish pass itself was constructed inside the piles using reinforced concrete. The steps for the fish to climb up are formed by the construction of a series of pools with what we call nibs and C-sections at the upstream end. Together, these create a small slot that the water passes through so that the target fish is able to burst through before resting in the pool above. And the photo on the right, you can see, it shows during construction of these nibs and C-sections. This may be easier to understand by looking at the plan drawings from these pools. Water passes, I'll just go back, so these are the nibs here and the C-section here. And in plan, we've got the nib and the C-section. Water passes between the nib and the C-section, as I've shown by the blue arrow, before being held up in the pool below, and the process repeats as it passes down through the fish pass. The flow of water should create eddies and calm spots where the fish can wait, as shown by the red dots, before the fish dart through the gap into the pool above. The water speed is at its fastest as it passes through between the nib and the C-section, but it's been designed so that it doesn't exceed 2.5 meters per second, which is slower than the fish's burst speed. In this sketch, I've tried to show in blue how the water will step down as it passes through the fish pass. I think it's easy to understand how the pools will form a series of small steps for the fish to swim up. On the outside of the fish pass are what are called the attraction flow channels. So in this photo, just to the left and to the right of these walls are these channels. These are needed to allow a sufficient volume of water to pass through the fish pass to allow the migrating fish to find the downstream entrance to the fish pass. These have been designed to be adjustable so that just the right amount of water passes through the fish pass to attract the fish, but not so much that it makes it difficult for them to use the fish pass. At the bottom of the fish pass, the water flows come together through large screens designed to smooth the flow of water and stop fish from swimming up these channels. At Diglis Fish Pass, there is an underwater viewing gallery and window that will be used for scientific monitoring of the fish using the pass and as an education facility for schools and members of the public. The building on top of the viewing gallery has been designed to go underwater when the river floods and has a waterproof door to stop water entering the building. In this photo, you can see our underwater window that we've designed to withstand being submerged by over 8 meters. We had to go to a specialist that supplies windows to the Sea Life Centre. The window is at the largest size that can be manufactured in the UK in one piece. The window is constructed from 4 laminations of glass, each 20 millimeters thick and having a total weight of 1 ton. The front lamination is designed to be replaceable should it be needed in the future. So before construction, we knew it would flood, and we had to make some key decisions before to allow us to build the structure. So yeah, we knew it would flood during the course of the works. The historic river level data, which is shown on this graph, shows typically that this happens 3 to 4 times a year. And we had to decide what level of flood protection should be provided by the works to allow us to build inside. A higher level equal more cost, but reduces the frequency of inundation into the works area. We decided to protect the works up to a level of 12 meters, which is shown by this brown line. And as you can see, the maximum recorded flood level is about 15.3 meters. And this green line shows the river level in 2019 and 2020. So quite often we were above our flood level. And at times the works area was over 3 meters underwater. And here's a few photos showing that. We were flooded out numerous times. However, at Diglis, the site tends to flood for 5 to 10 days before dropping, and it allowed us to allow the works to progress once it had dropped. In the left-hand photo, you can just about make out the fence to the edge of our fish pass, and in the right-hand photo, you can see the flood door doing its job and stopping the water getting into our building. Thought I'd share with you some key construction issues that were overcome during the works. I mentioned the piles that we used earlier. We used a specialist during the design phase. We decided to use a pile type called an AZ pile, which is basically shaped like a Z, hence its name. And we planned to install them by drilling some big holes in what we call the clutch positions, which is where they join together. So if you can see my cursor in this position and in this position, we used the machine that we can see on the right to drill these big holes that allowed us to then break up the rock below that they were going into to allow us to put these piles in. We used this machine, which had a special attachment which vibrates the piles into place as far as it can before basically we hit them with a big hammer to drive them into their final position. We had difficulty installing these piles due to the high bedrock level and harder than expected ground conditions that we found. These piles, these AZ piles, were supplied, they come together in pairs, and because of that, the distance that they between these crimped positions was about 1.5 meters. And what this meant was the big pile hammer that we used didn't quite fit over the top of the pile. You can just about make it see that in this photo on the left hand side. This is the hammer in red, and it's trying to sit on top of the pile, and it isn't quite big enough to go all the way over the top of the pile. This meant that a lot of the energy from the pile hammer wasn't properly going into the pile itself, and we started to bend over the top of the piles. And what we needed to do was weld these strengthening plates that you can see on this photo to strengthen up the pile, so we could actually hit it hard enough with a hammer to get them into place. We learned from this when we've built the similar fish pass at Lincoln, and we used a different type of pile, which is called a U-shaped pile, which are a bit shallower, so a bit less wide, so that the hammer fits completely over the top, and we found that we could get them into place. The other problem we found with the AZ piles was that they stretched slightly when they were manufactured, and they were joined together, and it meant each one was about 10 to 15 mil too long. So the overall length of the fish pass at Diglis is about 1 meter longer than what we intended because of that. Another thing we found during construction was the excavation works were supervised by a team of archaeologists, and we found some interesting features as we excavated through the line of the original weir. You can just about make out the weir on the right-hand photo, and exactly in line with that, we found these timber cut-off piles, and they were quite interesting because they had like a cast iron point on the end of them for when they were put in 200 years ago to be able to drive them in through the ground. And then we found that it had been fully backfilled with clay to try and stop water leaking around the outside of the original weir when it was being constructed. We also had some issues piling through the existing weir. As I mentioned at the start of the talk, the existing weir is constructed from an early form of concrete and stone pitchings, and you can see these big boulders on the face of it on this right, on both of these photos. we had to construct a platform out across the weir to give us access for construction plant to drill through the original weir itself, to allow us to then drive these piles through the structure. Once completed, we then needed to make good this damage that we'd caused in this area, to make sure over time that both the new and the old structures remain tied together properly. The other issue we had during construction was COVID-19. If you've walked past the site on the Riverside Path in Worcester, you'll have seen that we needed to cross the public footpath to get to the works area. And at the start of lockdown 1, we had to shut down the site temporarily whilst the situation became clear and we could work out how best to manage this and the other works to ensure that they remained COVID secure. We've relatively recently completed the construction of the Fish Pass, and it's now fully operational, which has been just in time for the spring spawning season for the Thwaite shad, which is ongoing as we speak. The Fish Pass has been fitted with monitoring equipment, which you can just about make out in this photo. And these are special devices so that tagged fish, if they go through or when they go through, it sends an alert to some monitoring equipment. And that allows us to see how well the Fish Pass performs over the coming months. So we've got a video of the completed works, which probably will show you better than I can explain. So hopefully this will work.
Unlocking the Severn is being delivered by Canal River Trust, Severn Rivers Trust, Environment Agency and Natural England, with vital support from National Lottery Heritage Fund and the EU LIFE programme. Hi, I'm Jason Leach, Programme Director for Canal River Trust on Unlocking the Severn. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to restore connectivity for migratory fish on the UK's longest river. Fish migration was severed about 180 years ago with the construction of the locks and weirs to facilitate navigation. The Thwaite shad population crashed almost overnight and has led it to be one of the UK's rarest fish today. We're building 4 big fish passes. Diglis, the biggest, at a massive 100 metres long, 8 metres wide and 5 metres deep, is the biggest deep vertical slot in England and Wales and has a unique underwater river viewing gallery. The Fish Pass is formed of a series of ascending pools that take the fish in manageable steps from one level at the bottom of the weir to the higher level above it. This year, for the first time in nearly 180 years, Thwaite shad will be able to pass and get upriver to their historic spawning habitats where they'll have a better chance of reproducing. This fish pass will also benefit other endangered fish species, including salmon, eel and lamprey.
The window in the Fish Pass will be used for scientific monitoring with specialist film equipment, but we're also really looking forward to welcoming visitors, and we're going to put in audio-visual installations. Visitors will be able to book a visit to come down into the Fish Pass and see through the window into the flowing river and hopefully see some of its wild fish.
Hopefully you could see from some of the aerial shots how the pools and the sea sections work and create the steps down and the eddies for the fish to swim up. It's been a very exciting time for us, and we've, as you could see, we've had tons of fish coming past the window, and it's been very exciting seeing them go past and use the Fish Pass. And we've had a few Thwaite shad go through over the last couple of weeks, so it's been amazing to be involved and seeing it work. To kind of complete the story of what we're building on the River Severn. As I mentioned earlier, the other type of fish pass used on this project is called the naturalised bypass channel, and this has recently been constructed at Severn Weir. So how do these work? These have a series of blocks known as perturbation boulders, which in this plan you can see all these dots going up through the fish pass, and there's a picture of them during construction. And these are essential to the success of this type of fish pass. These boulders have been carefully designed and positioned to break up the flow of water as it passes down the fish pass. This creates a series of water chutes and eddies where the fish are able to burst through and rest before continuing upstream. So again, I've tried to show that by the resting spot is with the red dot and their path by the green lines. So they hide behind the perturbation boulders and dart upstream. If you look closely, there's a plan of our boulders. You can see that the edges of the concrete have been carefully designed to ensure that water flows through the fish pass uniformly. These boulders are much larger than they seem, so they're a bit like an iceberg with much more below the bed level. This is to ensure that they're big enough to withstand the forces of the flowing River Severn for at least the next 120 years. I've got another video here, a short video showing this fish pass in operation.
Hi, I'm Charles Crundwell from the Environment Agency, and we're here today for the opening of Severn Fish Pass. I've been on this project for, well, 5-6 years, and it's just so exciting to see the water finally coming around in this common bypass that you see behind us, and bypassing Severn Weir, which is to my right. This is going to be so easy now for fish to come up, salmon, but particularly shad, which is what we're working on here, to move upstream and to go back to their historic spawning grounds.
So we've completed the fish pass at Diglis and Severn, which is the first two weirs that block passage for the fish on the River Severn, and we've also completed from a fisher's perspective the fish pass at Lincoln, which is what we can see in this photo here. So we're literally just finishing off the fencing and tidying up the field where we constructed it. And this fish pass is very similar to Diglis, but without the viewing gallery. So fish would be able to, are able to get up through here, but we still do have a blockage at Holt Fish Pass. This is a photo from, I don't know, about 2 weeks ago now. So last year, we dug a big hole and installed, these are soil nails which hold the hillside up to allow us to actually do the construction works. But we weren't able to continue building the fish pass during the over winter because of the high water levels in the river. So we started back in early April. So we're now constructing, it'll look very similar actually to this fish pass at Lincoln in between, though we've got a slightly different detail for retaining the ground either side. So we're hoping now for some really good weather over the summer to allow us to complete the construction of this fish pass, and that will be all of them done. Unfortunately, it's not been particularly good for the last in May, so we're just hopeful that the weather that we've had over the past couple of days continues now to give us a good run at getting this one built. So yeah, thanks very much for listening. As I said at the start of this talk, it's a whistle-stop tour of building the River Severn Fish Passes. I've covered quite a lot of areas, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions that have come through. And I'll ask Jenny to ask these questions on your behalf.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Richard. It's great to get your insights into that. So now we're going to go into the Q&A section. I've obviously moved my screen. And I will try and do my best to pick out the questions that have come in. I've answered a couple of them, but we might revisit them just to check I've got the answers right and see what further Rich would like to add. So let's start with a question at the top. How do the fish know where to go? How do they find the pass? So I'm going to put in mine a little bit, and then Richard can add. We talked about the channels going down the side of the fish pass that carry a large volume of water. That's because the migrating fish find the route by following the flow of the water. So where they can sense that there's a flow, an outflow from the fish pass, that's where they head for, because they're trying to head upstream. So if they can feel the current coming down, that's where they head. And that's why it's really important that we do get enough water through all of our fish passes so that the fish find them. So hopefully that answers your question.
So
Are you happy with that?
the other thing to note is the weirs are about 45 degrees to the river, so fish naturally want to keep swimming upstream. So I was hoping this photo would explain it a bit better, but a fish swimming upstream, if they find the weir, they'll keep swimming in this direction. So you can, which is why the fish pass is positioned on this side of the river. So they'll swim up, and as Jenny explained, we've got the flow of the water coming through the fish pass. So they keep swimming upstream and through and in to the fish pass itself.
Okay, slightly different question next, about what we've put in place at Beverley to stop children using the boulders as stepping stones. So I know we have a fence. I don't know whether you were party to any other discussions about that, Richard.
So yeah, there is a fence there. I guess kids could jump over that and step on them. The actual flow of the water in the video you'll have seen isn't actually very fast at all, which is obviously it's been designed to let the fish go through there. But it's Canal River Trust tend not to fully fence their assets. So if you go to a lock on the river, it's a similar. They're not fully fenced and protected, though we do have that at Beverley.
I think there's various factors involved, isn't there? Obviously, the weir in itself can be an attraction. On other rivers in other places, weirs tend to be where sometimes in the summer people go. So yeah, it's a tricky one, but sometimes even fencing something off can make it seem more attractive. So I guess those are all the aspects that have been considered. We've got a question about how much did the Diglis Pass cost?
It was about £4 million.
Significant amounts of money from our funders, which is the National Lottery Heritage Fund and the EU Life Programme. The next question we have is about, and there was another question about this as well, it's about visiting the viewing gallery. So we are really excited about this window into the river and the chance it gives us to share a view on the wild fish with the public. Because of various delays with COVID, and we still have some works on Diglis Island to provide some visitor facilities, toilets and things like that. We're not ready to open just yet, but we are hoping to be able to open it as a visitor experience later in the summer. It will be free. I think we're still trying to work out the model as to whether, I guess there's a possibility you might have to pay a refundable deposit or something like that, just to ensure that we don't get so many no-shows and then other people miss out on coming. But the idea is that it will be a free attraction. We'll have school groups booking on, and then we'll have a series of open days that other members of the public can join. and it will all be bookable via our website. So the best thing to stay in the loop on that is to go to unlockingthesevern.co.uk. Any page, scroll down to the bottom, and there's a place you can enter your email address and sign up to the newsletter. And we will obviously make sure those people on our email list are very first to know as soon as we are ready to launch booking for the Fish Pass. So I hope that answers your question. When will the Fish Pass be open to the public? Okay, similar. So we are trying to get it open perhaps as early as towards the end of July, but certainly later in the summer is what we're looking at. There's a question from Graham about whether the proximity of the sewage plant at Diglis gave us any problems. So Richard, that would be great to get your...
It was quite helpful really when we built it, because that was our access route in through their works area. But in terms of impact on fish, no, not at all. The actual outfall for the sewage treatment works is it's downstream of our construction area. It's probably a little bit further downstream than where this photo was taken. But no, it wasn't a concern at all for us, for either for the works or for concern for the fish themselves within the river.
I'm just going to go through some of the questions that I typed a little answer to, just to check, because Richard may have some things to add. So one was a question about how deep is each section, so from the surface of the water to the base of the pool. So I know that we normally talk about the Fish Pass being 5 metres deep, but do you have anything to add on a typical water level within that, Richard?
So the maximum depth is about inside the Fish Pass itself is about 2.5 to 3 metres. So this was during construction, but we've actually got a base. We've got a sloping base of rock that, in its final, when it was finished, that fills in like the bottom half metre to a metre, and the actual height of the water varies depending on what the upstream and tailwater river levels are doing. So at some points this week, for example, the water level downstream is somewhere here. It's about almost halfway up the Fish Pass, so you can't see. You can just about see the top of this sea section, but you can't see the bottom 3 or 4. But in the middle of summer, when the water levels are low, you'll see all 11 of the bays. And at times, as you saw on the flooding photo, which one was it? It will be completely covered over. But the deep vertical slot really is to do with how we've had to build it within retaining walls, which are probably almost at the bottom end twice as high as the actual Fish Pass itself through this area here.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense now you say it like that. Another question for you, Richard. How is the attraction flow altered? So maybe you could talk a little bit about the pen stock gates at the top.
Yeah, so again, I'm on the right photo here. So in here we've got what we call a pen stock, which is effectively a big door that we can wind up and down to control how much water goes through this section. And what we've found so far is with the river conditions that we've had, we can fully open this, and it gives the right. So we've got the maximum amount of water coming down through these channels, and they go back down through. You can just about make them out here. These fish screens at the end, which divert the flow of water back into what flows through the Fish Pass itself.
Thank you. We have a question from Graham. As a fisherman, he's interested in catching more fish and releasing them. Will my catching record improve? Well, we very much hope so. Be interested to hear where you're angling, where you're fishing from. These fish passes on the river are going to benefit all the fish on the river, and we're already seeing through the window in Diglis all kinds of river fish are using the pass. And if fish can move more freely on the river, it's good news for them. They can reach better spawning habitats, use less energy getting over obstacles. Even, for instance, salmon that can theoretically get over the weir have to expend a lot of energy and potentially make lots of attempts, which they use up energy and they can physically damage themselves. So opening up the river for fish so they can do what they would naturally do does mean that we expect to see them over generations being more successful and having a healthy population on the river. I guess it'd be interesting to see how quickly you notice that in your catch. So we know that when the weirs went in, the population of twait shad was almost immediately devastated, very quickly catastrophic for shad, and all the other fish were affected as well. So it's just a question of how quickly we will see the benefits. And I hope perhaps we'll be surprised and it will be quicker than we're expecting. There's a question from Ross on, do you think with an ever-growing focus on carbon, you would look now more at naturalised bypass channel rather than such a concrete pile-intensive solution, or was the space just not available?
Yeah, that was basically the problem here. There just wasn't enough space to be able to fit in the naturalised bypass channel at the other sites. Given the choice, that's what we would have done at all sites if we could have fitted it in. For most of the reasons you've just explained. Okay,
I have another question about the shad and how far they have got upstream. So they've struggled for 150 years, and how far did they get? Well, in a flood situation, they could occasionally get over the weir, but in a normal river flow, when the shad were migrating, which is in May, we haven't had a normal river flow this May. But the weir is, the river levels are lower and the weir is a complete barrier for shad. So we really don't think in normal conditions any shad were getting over. There was another part to that question, but it's just disappeared. Perhaps my colleague, if she can spot it, will send me back the other part to that question. Another question we've got, the window requires regular cleaning. At present, this is a manual process with a long-handled brush. Are there any plans to automate the process? Might be interesting actually for everyone, Richard, if you explained how we do clean the window.
And how So we can turn off the fish pass by, again, we've got two penstocks either side of this, what we call the splitter island here. So we have to shut that down, walk down through these steps and go out and clean the window. But here you can also see that we've got these screens, and these are designed to corral the fish so that they pass in front of the window. So we need to go down there regularly to be able to clean the screens, because naturally, particularly when the river is fairly fast flowing, it takes quite a lot of kind of leaf litter down with it. So we need to get in and clean these screens so that we get the correct flow of water going in front of the window, and at the same time we will clean the window. And it takes about a week for kind of algae to grow up on it. So yeah, that's what we'll need to do throughout the season.
I've got a couple more questions about cleaning and debris. So Mo's asking, how will debris be removed from between the sections? And Christopher's asking, how will they be kept free of litter? Is there a danger of any build-up in the pass?
Yeah, so on the front of the fish pass itself, there is screens which are slightly smaller than the gap between the nibs and the C sections, so that the bigger material shouldn't get into the fish pass itself. In a flood situation, the majority of the water, because it's parallel to the river, actually gets taken. If you've ever walked up the riverside path, you normally see that stuff collects in the middle of the weir, and that's the preferential route for the bigger material in the river to go through. But in the summer months, the majority of the water will be passing through the fish pass itself. So we will draw stuff in. So as I said before, we need to shut the flow down, and from this walkway on the left, you're able to be able to clear the bulk of any material that's caught on the front, and then we can go into the fish pass itself. And as I explained before, these screens will need to be cleaned. And you can actually walk down through the fish pass, and if there's anything within these pools that needs to be removed, you can do so. And also where this machine is, this was our access route during construction, and that's been left underneath the actual path that you now walk on. So if we need to in the future, you'd be able to bring a crane in to be able to lift out if any bigger stuff does collect in the fish pass itself. So we've got the means to maintain it as needed in the future.
Fantastic, thank you. Roger has a question: how will the success of the project be measured? Would you like me to speak about the monitoring, or do you want to?
I'm happy for you to, Jenny.
Okay, so we do, part of our project is the scientific monitoring. That's one whole stream of what we're doing, is unlocking the Severn. And we are using tagging fish and then monitoring how they move on the river. So we started in the first few years with acoustic tagging. So we put in a tag, it lasts, I think, about up to 3 years, and it has a little sonic ping, and there are receivers in the river, and each ping is unique to a fish, so we can track literally the movements of individual fish. And that's been really vital to see how the shad do move up and down, and how they approach barriers, and how it causes delays and problems, and how they don't get past Diglis. So we'll be able to monitor the success for shad by seeing shad, those individual shad, coming past these structures using the fish passes, and getting upriver to better spawning habitat. And over time, over generations, then we expect to see the size of the shad run increasing. So that will be the other way that we'll monitor the success. In the Diglis Fish Pass in particular, there is another tagging system with a different kind of tag. It's called a pit tag, which doesn't have a battery, so there's no limit to how long it lasts. And shad are repeat spawners. They can come back onto the river to spawn up to about 5 times. And that's sort of activated as it passes through a loop within the fish pass. And we've got a few sort of pit points along the fish pass, so we can get much more detailed information about how the fish approach the pass, how they move through it, just to make sure that the actual pass itself is working properly, and that the fish will come into the pass, they'll move all the way through the pass, they don't seem to be delayed or have problems at any particular point. So both those kind of ways we will monitor. And also we will see them through the window. And we're filming, so we can count the fish, count the shad, but also all the other kinds of fish. We're looking at some clever software that uses AI that can automatically see what kind of fish it is, and then we'll be able to do some clever monitoring by species as well. So there's so many opportunities to kind of use this to learn more about how fish are using the river. It's exciting. There was a question about, if no shad were getting past, how come they still come up the Severn to this point if they have no instinctive memory of the spawning ground upstream? That's a really good question. So obviously we know with salmon that they have this imprinting, and they're trying to find the place where they were spawned. We don't think that's the same for shad. And it's really interesting that this drive to come up the river, even after quite a strong selective pressure of 150 years where they've been blocked, is still there. It must be really deep in their kind of genetic makeup of the fish. So they just are motivated to come upstream in their spawning run. They do seem to, individual fish, we've got some interesting data that they have year on year. Individual fish will have similar characteristics, and some fish go further up the river than others. So presumably, whilst there have been barriers, there's been almost like a selective pressure that has enabled some fish to get a little bit lazy over the generations because it's, you know, maybe saves them time and energy rather than keep going up against a barrier they can't get past. But within the total population, there are definitely still pioneer individuals that want to go as far and as fast up the river as they can. And those will be the ones that sort of lead the charge. And then hopefully they will be more reproductively successful. And then we'll have the whole population will once again be motivated to go a long way up the river to spawn. There's a really interesting question here from Simon about whether fish seem to notice people through the windows. Do you want to talk about that, Richard? You've been in the window a lot.
I've not noticed that they've noticed, but that doesn't, that might be a reflection on me rather than the fish.
I spoke to my colleague about this recently, and he said they have noticed, we are learning so much, that they can startle, actually, if you sort of suddenly move up against the window. But generally, if you're just standing watching, it doesn't seem to bother them. And we use a light panel as well, which they probably do notice, but isn't putting them off. What about the most interesting fish you've seen through the window so far? What would you say, Richard?
The most exciting was seeing a shad go through there. But for me personally, every time I've been in there, I've seen a little dace. I don't think I've ever seen anything particularly interesting. But I've seen other people's photos, so.
We have seen a wide range of species so far. We've seen lots of bream coming through and chub, and we've seen lamprey as well, which is really exciting because they're very endangered. We've seen sea lamprey coming through the window, but when the pass was drained, when we were just commissioning it, it was drained down a number of times. We saw a river lamprey in the bottom of the pass as well. So lots of interesting fish and more to come, we hope. I think, amazingly, approaching 8 o'clock, we've pretty much run through the questions. Will there be a webcam on the window? We are finding our feet this year. We are continuously monitoring, but it's not being streamed live at the moment. It's something I think we'll consider. We're just literally finding our feet and seeing how it works. Or it may be that we'll do a sort of weekly release of the snippets of fish coming through. We have to see what's viable. Thank you all for such great questions. I hope we've answered them. I was occasionally clicking the wrong button, which meant that it said I'd answered, so apologies if I did cut anyone off. Simon Witten, I accidentally hit the wrong button to your second reply, but I've written your name down, so perhaps I will find you on Twitter and we can follow up there. If you want to contact the project, please get in touch. There's an email address on the website. Or there's a contact form. And it's really been really super to have you all along this evening. So thank you very much. And thank you in particular to Richard for sharing his insights with us. We will have a link to a survey, I think, going into the text box. And if anyone has the time to fill out, that'd be hugely appreciated. Do stay up to date with the project. Follow us on social media at Severn Unlocked. Sign up for the newsletter. That's the best place to make sure you get all the information about the Fish Pass opening. And yeah, we hope to see you in person as we gradually open up at more events that we can run in person.